Shut up and sit down.
Hello everyone, and welcome into another Red Out podcast. I am your Cape Crusader and guide on this illustrious tour of the series of unfortunate events that was the Maine Western football game, Devon, and sadly enough, Jake is not able to be here tonight. So, I'm going to be on this solo mission to lead you all through the horrendous game that was Maine's. I guess it depends on which side of the ball you're on. If you were cheering for Maine the other night, like the announcers were, this was a great game. But those Topper fans wouldn't be Topper fans for nothing if we weren't here to overcome adversity. So, we're going to go on a lighter note, cover a few light things across the country, the state, and then we'll get into the game recap with Western. So first off, let's talk about the big loss across the country, and that would be Arizona State. I'm sorry. If I can get to it real quick. Sorry about that. I had it pulled up. Control F. Arizona State. There we are. Arizona State versus Michigan State. So the big problem here in this game is Michigan State is number 15 in the nation, and they lose to Arizona State, who's 2-0. It was obviously a really close game, and similar to the Western game, Michigan State was held to 3 points in the first half. Arizona State had no scores until the second half, but Michigan State scored 10, and obviously Arizona State outscored them in the second half. But that's a big hit for Michigan State, and it'll probably knock them out of the top 20, if not the top 25 in the U.S. It's pretty. I obviously did not watch that game. I'm not sure where they played, if it was away or home. If it was at Arizona State, it's probably Pacific time, and I'm not staying up that late. Sorry, guys. Secondly, let's see here. In the state, the big crazy game was the end of the 31-year streak that Florida had on the Hilltoppers. There was a lot of emotion with that game, and that was, a really big thing for UK fans, winning 27-16 at Florida. I'm sure a lot of UK fans would have rather that been at home last year, but sadly they can't perform at home. So, the other big in-state school, being Louisville, was tied 7 all the way up until the third quarter, I do believe. Jake can correct us next week. And then with Indiana State, which, that's god-awful, being tied with the smaller school of Indiana State, which, by the way, is the home of Larry Bird, I do believe. And so, anyway, Louisville ended up winning that game 31-7 and pulling away, and they'll be playing us this coming week. Winners, losers, obviously Western and Maine. Winners are Maine, getting paid $300,000 and skating home back to the illustrious state with more black bears than black people and the greatest drinking water in the nation, which, by the way, Maine might as well be part of Canada. Not hating, just saying. But that game was it was obviously losers being Western in this one, but one of my losers for this game, sadly enough, is the offensive line. I'm usually try to be an advocate for the O-line because I was a former offensive lineman in high school. So I try to stay with my horseman brothers, but I'm sorry guys, you allowed 6 sacks in this game. Eccles' injury may have been a weakness for the Hilltoppers, but him getting hit 6 times is not helping. However, he did throw for 347 yards and 3 touchdowns, so you can't doubt that. And with Western scoring 21 points in the first 90 seconds of the game, well, let's see here. Somebody said 90 seconds, that's not right. I guess 90 seconds of their possession time. But, Western had more total yards at 389. Maine had 324. We both had even turnover amounts. Western had more first downs. The only difference is Maine had more possession time. So looking at those stats, that tells me that either we did really stupid mistakes and turned the ball over, or they just had really, really, really great field position. And due to not having a lot of fumbles, well, I think we had one fumble in the game, but Eccles never threw an interception. So for me, that's a great plus for him because he was able to push it and not have any kind of turnovers that way. So you got to love that as far as those go. And secondly, back to the main game here. You can't blame, as far as Western goes, you can't blame players because you can blame players. Okay, let me take that back. I believe this game was a 50-50 issue between coaching, which the most infamous call is the 4th and 1 on your own 15, which luckily I had to let my dogs out to go to the bathroom, and I did not see the touchdown because I would probably have thrown my TV out the window. But it's frustrating to see that because you know that's a bad call. I mean, as a fan, you're sitting there watching and you're saying, that's not a good call, why aren't we doing this? And even some people have claimed that it was the same play twice in a row. I don't think it was that obvious that he would run 2 plays like that in a row. Looking at stats here, the only player we had to go over rushing-wise, we had no players. We had 2 players break. Oh, no, sorry. We didn't have any players break 50 yards, okay? So that's a problem. That's a big problem. The most yards we had was from a freshman, LaFrance, which, by the way, congratulations, buddy, on being the Red-Out player of the game, offensive player of the game. We would give it to Eccles, but we gave it to Eccles in the first week. So we're going to let LaFrance have it this week. This young man played amazing. He had rushing, he had receiving. I mean, he was everywhere. He had 90 receiving yards. His longest was 75, which, that's awesome. He had 33 rushing yards, which, being a running back, you think he'd have a little more, but I am fine with doing a Tom Brady Patriot style. Excuse me. Sorry. My apologies, people. My Red-Out fans, let me get a drink here. Excuse me. But the absence of a run game here really was a detriment to Western. I believe the ultra-conservative play was another issue coming in this game. When you're up 21 in the first quarter, you have to capitalize on that. And, of course, another issue is defensive play. My biggest takeaway from that game is watching defensive players making contact with Maine, with the Black Bears behind the ball, or behind the line of scrimmage, excuse me. And when they're not wrapping up, I mean, that's high school stuff, guys. You're watching it and you're just like, that's frustrating to me because we'd have a person on the ball. Now, ideally, you want to swarm the football because the more people you have around the ball, if there's a fumble or if the tackle is missed, running back slips through, etc., you've got somebody there who can be able to take care of it. But with one person there, I mean, you don't have good odds. So that's another issue of mine. Western's defense did fairly well. We only had 3 sacks, which I'd love to have a lot more pressure. But with Maine having mostly, they had a lot more receiving yards than they did rushing. However, their receiving yards are very deceptive because their longest reception is 51 yards, but he only had 1 reception. So that shows me that obviously that was a bad play on our part. But they weren't deep receptions other than that one. And, I mean, carries, Joe Fitzpatrick was their go-to guy. He had 82 yards. But 142 yards rushing. That just tells me that, hey, Maine did what they were supposed to do, and Western obviously didn't. You can tell that by the score. So, some big takeaways. There was a big controversial call. I was really confused. I watched the game on ESPN Plus, which, by the way, if you're an iTunes user, it's really easy to do. You can add it to your subscription list, and it's $5 a month. But the biggest takeaway for me was the confusion on the, I believe it was the fumble call. No, it wasn't the fumble call. It was the handoff around the right side. I cannot remember the player, but he goes running towards the end zone, gets hit at the end zone, and fumbles. Of course, they had to review the play, reviewed, and of course, the big takeaway for me watching that is this guy fumbles the ball, it gets pushed out the back of the end zone, and I'm thinking, wait a second, isn't that a safety? Well, I mean, what's going on here? The referees have not blown a whistle this entire time while I'm watching this, and I'm just sitting there going, what's going on? It was really a confusing moment at that time. And the biggest issue I have with that is we needed cameras on the other side. If we had cameras on the other side of the field, or even if we had cameras in the end zones for the broadcast and for the officials to use, then we would see a lot bigger, we could see a better angle for that. But not having that is a big detriment to Western. Now, what some fans may or may not know is that we do have cameras in the scoreboard, and we used to have cameras on the opposite end zone that could see that, but that's only for team use. They use that for film and other issues. So, the other call was the referees reversed was the Eccles fumble, which as soon as I saw that play, I was like, it's not a fumble. His arm's moving forward. If you go by the definition of the rule, his arm is moving forward, so that's forward momentum, so that's a pass. Okay, so with his arm moving forward like that, when the defender hit it, knocked the ball loose, then evidently it's not a fumble. It's got to be good, or incomplete pass. I'm sorry. So I knew that was coming back. Just watching it, unless the refs just botched the call, which if they were as bad as the announcers, who were completely pro-Maine. Don't get me wrong, I love an underdog story, but if it's a Conference USA team on ESPN Plus, you think they'd be a little more pro-Western. I'm just saying. Some consequences, I believe, since everybody is up in arms for Sanford's job, which was my first takeaway after the game, is how many people were angry and completely frustrated by that game, which I completely agree. Don't get me wrong, I was completely frustrated with that game, but demanding Sanford's head on a pike is by far the answer that we need at Western right now. I agree, maybe some things may need to change, but losing to Maine, as frustrating as it is to lose to an FCS opponent, is not an automatic termination. Yes, it's frustrating. Do not get me wrong. I completely agree. And as we said last week, it was one of those things that once we even called it, we were supposed to win that game. That should have been an easy game. And after I saw the 21-0 lead, I thought, this game is over. I mean, if we go by the scores, this game's going to be like 89-0 by the end of it, However, that's not the case. So, some consequences I'm seeing from the Maine game. Well, first off, let's start with, should Sanford be fired, or what can he do to save his job? Should he be fired at this point? No. I do not believe that any coach could recover from the downward spiral that is occurring at this point. I don't think that's an advisable thing to do, and I don't believe Todd Stewart would do that. Now, on that course, I do not believe that Todd Stewart is thinking, I don't know what his boundaries are, if that makes sense. I don't know if he wants to, if he has in his head to say, if you lose to Ball State, Marshall, MTSU, UTEP, some of those teams, where is the line drawn in the sand? I don't know if his loss to, was it Georgia Southern or Georgia State? It doesn't matter because the team was so small, it shouldn't matter. We should have won that bowl game. I mean, it's a Sun Belt opponent who just joined the Sun Belt. For me, that was a minus in my scorebook for keeping Sanford. And of course, like other writers and media people, I tried to give Sanford enough hope because it's like, hey, this is his first season. He's only been an offensive coordinator up to this point. You have to give him a little bit. But I'm sorry, Maine, my rope got tight, so to speak, because my saying is give someone enough rope to hang themselves. Well, I'm out of slack, okay? I love Sanford. He's a great guy. I completely support the Hilltoppers in what they do, but at the same time, that game was so frustrating. It's just really, it's rough to talk about. However, let's, after reading an article online from the Towel Rack by Sam Gormley, how would Sanford save his job at this point? I completely agree with this article from the Towel Rack. But good, these are a good bunch of guys. Completely support them. First off, Sam says that Coach Sanford should delete his Twitter, which I completely agree. Out of everything I've read negative about Coach Sanford, he should delete his Twitter, and he should not check his Facebook. The only page I would check would be the WKU alumni players, because those guys are so positive. I believe a Towel Rack writer tried to comment on an issue, and he was immediately shut down, and they said that kind of talk is not allowed on that page, which was really shocking for me. So another thing, of course, this is probably one of the most difficult things for him to change, is to fire his father. For Mike Sanford Jr. to fire Mike Sanford Sr., it's kind of a hard thing to ask for you to fire your father. However, with him being the running backs coach, and last year he was the special teams, and I think he was the offensive line coach. I'm sorry, but those are the worst positions on the field in my book. Special teams has been taken over by Jamie DeBerry, who is a great guy. I met him 10 years ago when I was at Western. But these guys are going to work hard, and they're going to do the best they can because they love Western. And Jamie DeBerry actually came from Franklin, Simpson County, and he's a really good guy. But I think he's going to work really hard and do his best, and I think that has shown for Western special teams. But the best thing to happen there would be is if his father would step down and allow another coach to come in, because we have no running game. We have nothing. And when you have less than 100 yards from a player, I mean, like Furby, Trigg, of course, Jakari Moses is injured, but that young man was great last year, and it's just really frustrating to see. But we've got to do something on the running game. You have to have more running so that Eccles has more room to play. If Eccles has more room to play, then we have a lot more freedom in the offense, and I think that takes a lot of pressure off of Coach Sanford. Another thing they said was to lay on the gas. Sanford is notorious for going conservative whenever he has the lead, and I don't believe that necessarily that's a good thing. It depends on who you're playing in some aspects, because you can lay on you can be conservative and try and burn up clock if you're towards the end of the game, but you want to have a comfortable lead by 2 or 3 touchdowns. You don't want to have a single touchdown lead and go for it on 4th and 1. That's, as risque as that may seem, that's not a smart play. There's a difference between being smart and being foolish in that case. 2 big games they said we needed to win was Marshall and MTSU. if he wins those two games, those being quote rivalry games, MTSU more so than the Marshall game. MTSU, if we've snuck by them, we snuck by them last year in 2 or 3 overtimes, but we've got to beat Marshall. Marshall's been the front runner in the conference. We upset them when they were number 25 in the U.S. in the country. I'm sorry, and if you beat those two, that helps your resume as far as staying at Western, and that helps your case. Okay, the last point is don't lose to the easy opponents. Again, that's paraphrasing. But the Charlottes, the ODUs, UTEP, and even FIU, who is notoriously a fast team, you can't lose to those guys. You can't lose to any of them. Now, in my opinion, there's some people who have posted that said that you can't lose to Ball State or Marshall, and I disagree. I don't think that's a possibility to win. If you win both, that's great, which I would love to see that happen. If you lose to one or the other, which is a huge possibility, it could happen. Now, side note, Marshall, Ball State actually just played Notre Dame and kept the game close. Let me look that up real quick. Sorry, it's going to be a couple seconds of quiet. But I'll try and talk here. But Marshall's been they're 2-0 right now, with us being the flip side of that, and it's just frustrating because we've got to do better, and at this point, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Excuse me. Fighting allergies in Kentucky has got to be the single worst thing. I live in perpetual purgatory because of it. Okay, so we're looking at the scoreboard here. Last week, Ball State played number 8 Notre Dame, kept it to 24-16. Ball State was held to 6 points in the first half. Notre Dame, sorry, I almost said Florida State, I don't know why. Notre Dame, 14 points, so it's 14-6 at half, and Ball State put on the NOS at the end and got 10 points, and Notre Dame scored 10 points to keep the lead. But that's one of those games that's going to be a tough opponent. I don't think people realize how tough that was. And last year, us winning was a fluke. I hate to say that, guys, but it was a fluke. I've played Ball State before. I've been up there, and I've been at home and played them, and they're a tough opponent. They are nothing to sneeze at. Ball State is, of course, last year they were led by David Elson's defensive coordinator, but it's going to be a tough game. I think something we need to take away from this is the consequences of our main loss. Well, the main reason of us losing. We're going to expect lower attendance now. Up until homecoming, I don't see Western having nearly as many fans at the games. And, of course, that's going to be detrimental to the program itself. Of course, another big issue is fans calling for Sanford to be fired. A lot of what you're going to see is anytime something happens in the program now, they're going to be calling for his head. They want it on a silver platter as it is right now. If he gets a couple wins under his belt like they're hoping, it could be a little buffer there or some saving grace for him, but it's just not looking good. Of course, this hasn't happened yet, this next point, but doubt in the players' minds. If your players doubt you, they're not going to run through a wall for you. You want your players to be able to run through a wall when you tell them to. They have to have the faith that whatever you call is going to work out. Because if it doesn't, a half a step could be the difference between a touchdown and 4th and 1. There's a lot of things here that play into things. Of course, the next point is doubting coaches' minds. So when you're in a meeting, of course, these guys are professionals, don't get me wrong, but in the back of their minds, they're human. They're going to have doubt. So, I'm not calling out any coach in particular, but some coaches may doubt the call, they may doubt what's going on. Sanford can put it all on his shoulders as he wants to, but as I said before, the fans are calling for you to be fired. what do you do as an assistant coach? Because somebody could come up to you and say, hey, what do you think of this? You got to have your coach's back, but at the same time, you may not agree with it, but you have to keep that to yourself. And if things start hitting the fan like they have been, you may see a little more mutiny in the assistant coaches. And of course, the last thing is fear. And I mean that for Coach himself. Because here's the bottom line. He's got kids. He's got a wife. He's got a home here. And at the end of the day, he wants to keep his home all in one piece. I don't know how old his children are. But as a parent, you would think that, hey, my kids are getting used to this school. They're getting used to this. I understand the coaching life. You get moved around a lot. But at the same time, you want your kids to have stability. And if you're constantly looking over your shoulder thinking that, hey, Todd Stewart's here again, wonder what he's doing, or why is this guy here, or why is this here, it's a distraction. And it could be detrimental to your program. It could be detrimental to your psyche. I can imagine it'd be hard to sleep here in the next few days if I was Coach Sanford. But we're going to move ahead. We're going to talk some Louisville football here in just a second. Louisville, evidently, is an ACC opponent. Someone called them Western's rival. I think that's a joke. You got to be kidding me, dude. There was a dude on Facebook commenting on the WKU football post and said, well, they're rivals. You've got to win this game. Dude, are you smoking crack? You got to be kidding me, right? Don't be telling me that Western has to win the Louisville game. First off, from what I understand, Puma has an issue with Turf Toe, who is the starting quarterback for... Sorry, I'm trying to find the stats here. Puma is the starting quarterback for Louisville. So far, he's 28 of 53 for 341 yards and 2 TDs and 3 interceptions. Eccles is 514 yards, 300 TDs. He's 38 of 67. So, that's better than what Louisville's got. So that's positive there. LaFrance, leading rusher so far for Western. Wilson is leading rusher for Louisville. He's got 58 yards. Sounds like they're having as big an issue with it as we are. Lucky Jackson, 8 receptions, 137 yards, 2 TDs. Dawkins, 5 receptions, 80 yards. That does not sound good to me. According to ESPN, Western is only at 7.2% chance of winning. Louisville is a 22.5 point favorite. So it doesn't look good, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. We could shock the world. I want to be positive and say we could shock the world, but the realist and the pessimist in me says no. We're going to be playing at Louisville. They just played Indiana State at home, so you got to look at those numbers. Of course, Indiana State being a lower tier team too, we have a better chance. However, coming off the main loss, my biggest hope out of this game is that no one gets injured, so that when we start conference play in the next few weeks, that everything works out fine. Hoping Eccles gets better. Hope everything works out there. And, excuse me. Just, when we go into conference play, we've got to look forward. There's a couple teams, of course, as the season goes on, we're going to be changing our list as far as everything goes, but I've got 3 teams in mind right now that are probably 4 teams that are probably going to be tough wins. I've got a few teams that are probably should be easy wins, and I've got some toss-ups. Has that changed from the first episode? Yes, most definitely, sadly, but that's how football goes. Sometimes the ball rolls your way, sometimes it doesn't, and just hope that everything works out well for the Hilltoppers this weekend. How can you watch the game? That's the big question tonight. everyone is asking. Let me see if I can find it real quick for you guys. I believe it's on the ACC network. Let's see. Let me see if I can find that real quick for you. Okay, apparently you can watch it through stream. Okay, here we go. Courier Journal. Unless you're a pirate like Jake, there's not a lot of chance of doing some things like that, but let's see here. The game is at 7:30 Saturday at Cardinal Stadium. It's Fox Sports South in Louisville. Radio WHAS 840. Watch ESPN.com. Apparently we haven't played since 1998. But let's go out and support the Hilltoppers this week. Enjoy some awesome weather up in Louisville. Hopefully Hurricane Florence isn't going to be there. If he is, it may be a good game for us because it'll cut down on some issues that we have. But let's quickly talk. Usually this segment will do ranking, but I will forego that this week because I usually let Jake take care of that. Actually, how about this? We'll talk a little bit history-wise. Western history. The last time, and this is, I know I'm repeating what everybody else has said from 10 years ago, because I'm one of the old-timers now. Last time Western lost to an FCS team was when Western played Indiana State. It was part of the 26-game losing streak. It was one of the last games of the 26-game losing streak. And let me tell you guys, if you want to hear a bunch of alumni yelling and screaming at players, that was the game. That was the most uncomfortable locker room I've been in at halftime. And I don't blame them. I was really frustrated myself, and I was working the sideline. And, a lot of times you think, why are they yelling? Why are they screaming? This isn't doing any good as far as, alumni go. But I was agreeing with everything they were saying. It was ridiculous. But you go through the dark to get to the light as far as that goes. It's always darkest before the dawn. How many other sayings can I spit out real quick here? But the guys we're just going to have to work harder. I'm sure the guys are working hard as it is. But you just got to, is it coaching? Yes. I mean, we could have issues. Coach Sanford could be a Joker Phillips, a great recruiter. He just can't put the pieces together. So, my final thought, or TLDR, Western can recover. We can do better. We're playing Louisville this weekend. Louisville's a 22.5-point favorite. I imagine that'll go up as we get closer to game time. They are 1-1 in their record so far, and I expect Western to do amazingly. Hoping Western recovers. I hope no one's injured. Let's always remember to subscribe to our iTunes podcast. Follow us on Twitter. And subscribe, follow, review on iTunes. Thanks again, guys, and go Tops.